The next area here we're talking about interviewing and heuristic traps is the typical halo effect. I think this person's wonderful, wears a halo. Oh my gosh, this person's great. I really like the fact that this person loves to go out and fish for salmon, and I love to fish for salmon, makes me appreciate this person more than somebody else. Maybe you've gotten a job because someone said to you, what do you like to do in your part-time, off time? And you say, well, I play tennis. Oh, well, I happen to be a tennis player as well, and I need a partner. And so suddenly you have a job, or the person's giving a job to an individual because of some type of bias. And usually it's a halo type bias. There's also the other side, which is, we phrase it as the devil's horn. And again, let me just mention in HR, it's such a new field that not all these terms are going to be used across the the geographic regions, but there's going to be an understanding of these labels. And the phrase devil's horn just basically means, I pull out the negative characteristics and I highlight them. Even though I may not be a negative critiquer, I will just simply pull out, there are some things about this person, and I just raise those horns up anytime the team is looking at this individual and asking whether I appreciate or asking whether or not I would support the applicant. So again, stereotyping is another problem with this for individual teams who do the interview, for individual supervisors who do the interview. And I think many of us understand the problem of bias and stereotyping. You'll hear subtle phrases in the interview from the interviewers that indicate there's some sort of stereotyping in the background going on. So as a HR individual, be careful of that. I would actually, as HR, provide a packet of information as to, and maybe even some minor training on how to interview. But I would make my interviewers, my panels, my teams aware of these individual problems or these traps that they could find themselves in. There is some legal liability. The book mentions this, and I'm glad it does. In terms of, and by the way, there's legal liabilities all over, legal traps to fall into, which is why we have HR as a separate entity now in most of them, or most organizations. The HR is able to remain independent and look at a number of issues across the board, not just staffing, not just the workforce availability, not just doing, in a sense, we talked about earlier, workforce analyses, but they're also able to look at legal issues, whereas the online manager or the president, the CFO, they're typically not attuned to where the legal risks are. But one of the legal risks is what we refer to as negligent hiring. And that's when in the HR process of staffing, you don't do a good job. You hire somebody negligently. You have a duty to find the individual who's most qualified. And if you have hired somebody that creates a public problem, a potential harm to your customer base, if an example of that would, then you could be liable for the damages from individuals suffering that harm. We're not teaching tort law or negligence in this course, but basically just think of it as a duty that you owe to your customer base or anybody that's in your neighborhood or around your business or other employees, anybody. You would have a duty to owe them to hire somebody that's safe, who's not going to go out there and use the company's access, to use the company's tools, use the company's vehicles to basically go out there and harm. So in terms of, let's say that you are a transportation company and you're hiring truck drivers, you do a background check for a lot of reasons because you don't want to be putting a driver out there who's unsafe, who is notoriously unsafe. If you do that, you would have, by law, the legal standards, have breached a duty to find the right person. You've harmed other people through your negligent hiring. So again, there's a lot of legal traps here. That one, though, needs to be explained. I will mention, moving on, just the idea of drug testing is really problematic and probably too much of a complex issue for this course. But let's just say that basically drug testing is permissible where it is needed. Remember the first thing we said, I think in chapter 1, was, when you're looking at HR, stick to the job. If it's not in the job description, if it's not part of the job, don't include it in HR. HR does not need to be brought down, so to speak, with non-job related matters. And this is one Don't drug test for anybody and everybody in the company, only for those people where it really matters. People who are working in sensitive areas or high risk areas or whatever, and that way you're keeping the company and other employees safe.